The pistol cracked through the desert air, and Clara Ashford didn't flinch as the bullet struck the wooden post 3 inches from the sheriff's head. The afternoon heat shimmered off the dusty street of Laredo, Texas, and every soul within earshot stopped to watch the woman in the torn calico dress lower her smoking revolver with hands as steady as the Rio Grande in summer. It was August of 1878, and Sheriff Milton Hayes stormed toward her with fury written across his sunburned face. "That's it, Miss Ashford. You're a damn troublemaker, and I won't have you terrorizing decent folk in my town." "Terrorizing?" Clara's green eyes flashed with indignation. "That man tried to steal my horse, my property, the only thing I got left in this world after my father died. You could have killed someone." The sheriff grabbed her arm, but Clara yanked it free. "I could have, but I didn't. I'm a better shot than that." A crowd had gathered now, forming a loose circle around them. Among the onlookers stood a tall cowboy with sun-bleached hair and eyes the color of Texas bluebonnets. Kade Zimmerman had ridden into Laredo that very morning, driving a small herd of cattle for the Rockingham Ranch. He'd been washing trail dust from his throat at the saloon when the commotion started, and something about the woman's fierce defiance caught his attention in a way he couldn't quite explain. "She's right, Sheriff." The words left Kade's mouth before he'd fully thought them through. "I saw the whole thing. That fellow was leading her mare away when she called out. He kept going, so she fired a warning shot." Sheriff Hayes turned his glare on Kade. "And who the hell are you, Kade Zimmerman? Just passing through, but I know theft when I see it." "This doesn't concern you, cowboy." "Maybe not." Kade stepped forward, his boots stirring up little clouds of dust. "But seems to me the lady was defending what's hers. That's not a crime last I checked." Clara studied this stranger who'd spoken up for her. He was tall and lean, with the weathered look of a man who'd spent most of his 25 years under the open sky. There was kindness in his eyes, something she hadn't seen much of since her father's death 3 months prior. Sheriff Hayes spat into the dirt. "The Ashford girl has been nothing but trouble since her daddy passed. Won't sell that worthless piece of land, won't leave town, just sits out there alone acting like she can do whatever she pleases." "Because it's my land," Clara said firmly, "and I'm not leaving." "Fine. But you fire another shot in town limits and I'll lock you up. I don't care what the reason is." The sheriff jabbed a finger at her, then at Kade. "And you'd be wise to stay out of matters that don't involve you." The crowd dispersed as the lawman stalked away. Clara holstered her revolver and walked toward her mare, a beautiful chestnut with a white blaze. Kade followed. "Thank you for speaking up," she said without looking at him. "Most folks around here prefer to pretend I don't exist." "Why's that?" "Because I'm a woman alone, and that makes people uncomfortable. They think I should either remarry quick or sell my land to one of the big ranchers and move on." She stroked her horse's nose. "This is Penny. She was a gift from my father on my 20th birthday. That was 3 years ago, before the fever took him." "I'm sorry about your father. So am I." Clara finally met his gaze. "I didn't catch your name." "Kade Zimmerman." "Well, Mr. Zimmerman, I appreciate what you did, but the sheriff was right about one thing. This town doesn't take kindly to my troubles, and you'd be smart not to get tangled up in them." She started to mount her horse, but Kade caught Penny's bridle gently. "What if I told you I'm not particularly smart when it comes to walking away from someone who needs help?" A smile tugged at the corner of Clara's mouth, the first genuine one she'd felt in weeks. "Then I'd say you're either very brave or very foolish. Maybe both." He released the bridle. "Where's this land of yours?" "About 5 miles west of town." "Why?" "I'm between jobs at the moment. Delivered my herd, got paid, and I've got some time before my next drive. Seems to me a woman living alone might could use an extra hand, especially if folks in town are giving her grief." Clara's expression hardened. I don't need charity, Mr. Zimmerman. Good, because I'm not offering any. I'm offering honest work for honest pay. Your spread got cattle, horses. Anything need fixing? She hesitated, pride warring with practicality. The truth was everything needed fixing. The fence had gaps, the barn roof leaked, and she had 15 head of cattle that needed branding before fall. She'd been trying to do it all herself, but it was too much for one person. I've got cattle that need working, she admitted, and the fences are in bad shape, but I can't pay much. Room and board is enough for now. We can settle on wages later. Clara studied him for a long moment, searching for any hint of ulterior motives. But all she saw was genuine kindness and maybe a touch of loneliness that matched her own. All right, Mr. Zimmerman, you can follow me out. The ride to the Ashford place gave Kade time to admire the landscape. The land here was harsh but beautiful, all wide skies and endless horizons punctuated by mesquite and cactus. Clara rode ahead, her posture straight and proud despite her worn clothing and the weight of her circumstances. The ranch itself was modest, just a small house, a barn and a few corrals. But Kade could see it had been built with care. The house had a covered porch and real glass windows, luxuries in this part of Texas. The barn was solid, even if the roof did need patching. My father built most of this himself, Clara said as they dismounted. He came out here in '65, right after the war ended. Said he wanted land where a man could breathe free. He chose well. This is good grazing land. It is when the creek runs full. We've been lucky this year with rain. She led Penny into the barn, and Kade followed with his own horse, a sturdy buckskin gelding named Rex. You can put your horse in that stall there. I'll show you where you can bed down. The bunkhouse was small but clean, with 2 cots and a potbelly stove. Kade tossed his bedroll onto one of the cots and set his saddlebags down. I'll cook us some supper, Clara said from the doorway. Nothing fancy, but it'll fill you up. Sounds perfect to me. That evening, they sat on the porch eating beans and cornbread, while the sun painted the western sky in shades of orange and purple. Kade learned that Clara had grown up in St. Louis, the only child of a widowed father who dreamed of starting fresh in Texas. She'd learned to ride and shoot almost as soon as she could walk, skills her father insisted would serve her well on the frontier. He was right, she said quietly. I just wish he'd lived long enough to see the ranch succeed. We were so close. Another year or two and we'd have had enough cattle to really make something of this place. You still can. Maybe. She didn't sound convinced. The big ranchers around here have been pressuring me to sell. Richard Maloney in particular. He owns the spread to the north, about 20,000 acres. He's made me 3 offers, each one lower than the last. Why lower? Because he knows I'm struggling. He figures I'll get desperate enough to take whatever he offers. Her jaw tightened. But I won't. This land is all I have left of my father. I'll die before I let Maloney take it. The fierce determination in her voice stirred something in Kade's chest. He'd met plenty of tough men in his years working cattle, but he'd never met anyone quite like Clara Ashford. She reminded him of a desert flower, beautiful but resilient, thriving in conditions that would kill most people. Over the next few weeks, Kade threw himself into the work. He repaired the barn roof, mended fences, and helped Clara round up her cattle for branding. They worked from sunrise to sunset, and with each passing day, Kade found himself more drawn to this woman who refused to quit no matter how hard life pushed her. Clara felt it too, though she tried to ignore it. She'd told herself after her father died that she didn't need anyone, that she was better off alone. But Kade made her question that belief. He was different from the other men she'd known. He listened when she talked, valued her opinions, and never once suggested she couldn't handle the work. When they rode out to check the cattle, he rode beside her as an equal, not a protector. One afternoon in early September, they were working together to separate a calf from its mother for branding when Clara's horse stumbled in a gopher hole. She pitched forward, hitting the ground hard enough to knock the wind from her lungs. The frightened calf bolted, and the mother cow, a large longhorn with impressive horns, charged. Kade moved without thinking. He spurred his horse between Clara and the charging cow, turning the animal away at the last possible second. Then he was off his horse and kneeling beside her. "Clara, Clara, can you hear me?" she gasped, trying to pull air into her lungs. Kade helped her sit up, his hands gentle but firm as he checked her for injuries. "Easy, just breathe. You got the wind knocked out, that's all." "The calf," she managed to wheeze. "To hell with the calf. Are you hurt?" She shook her head, still struggling for breath. Gradually, her breathing evened out and Kade helped her to her feet. Her horse had wandered a few yards away, favoring its right front leg. "Penny's hurt," Clara said, moving toward her mare. Kade caught her arm. "Let me check her first." He approached the horse slowly, talking in low, soothing tones. Penny allowed him to lift her leg and examine the hoof. "She's got a stone bruise, nothing serious, but she shouldn't be ridden for a few days. We can ride double back to the house." They mounted Rex together, Clara sitting in front of Kade with his arms on either side of her holding the reins. It was the closest they'd been, and Clara was acutely aware of his chest against her back, his warmth seeping through her shirt. "Thank you," she said quietly. "That cow could have gored me. You would have done the same for me." "Would I?" She felt more than heard his laugh. "Yeah, you would. You're the bravest woman I've ever met in life, Clara Ashford." Something warm bloomed in her chest at his words. "You barely know me. I know enough. I know you're fighting to keep your father's dream alive, even though this whole town wants you to fail. I know you work harder than any two men I've ridden with. And I know that, when your horse went down, your first thought wasn't for yourself but for that damned calf." Clara turned her head slightly, just enough to see his profile. "Why did you really offer to help me that day in town?" Kade was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. "Honestly, I'm not entirely sure. I just knew I couldn't walk away. Something about you, the way you stood up to that sheriff, the fire in your eyes, it called to something in me." "What are you running from, Kade?" The question surprised him. "What makes you think I'm running?" "Because people don't just wander from job to job unless they're looking for something or running from something. Which is it? Maybe both." He guided Rex around a patch of prickly pear. "My family's back in Kansas. My father wanted me to take over the farm, but I couldn't stand the thought of being tied to one place forever. We fought about it, said things we shouldn't have. I left when I was 18 and haven't been back since. That was 7 years ago. Do you regret it?" "Sometimes. I think about writing to them, but I don't know what I'd say. Sorry I chose a wandering life over the one you planned for me. You could just say you miss them. That would probably be enough." They rode in silence for a while, the setting sun casting long shadows across the prairie. When they reached the ranch, Kade helped Clara down and then tended to both horses while she started supper. That night, as they ate, Clara made a decision. "I want to show you something." She disappeared into the house and returned with a wooden box. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to her father from various people back in St. Louis. "After my mother died when I was 5, my father got letters from well-meaning friends and family telling him he should send me back to live with relatives. That a frontier was no place for a little girl. He kept every letter, and when I was old enough, he showed them to me. You know what he said?" Kade shook his head. "He said that other people's expectations are like fence posts. They can guide you, but they shouldn't trap you. The life you choose has to be yours, not someone else's idea of what your life should be." She closed the box. Maybe you didn't want the life your father planned for you, and maybe that hurt him, but you're living a life that's true to yourself. That takes courage. Is that what you're doing? Living true to yourself. I'm trying. Some days it feels impossible, but then I remember why I'm fighting so hard. This land, this ranch, it's not just my father's dream. It's mine too. I want to prove that a woman can run a spread just as well as any man. I want to show all those people who have written me off that they were wrong. Kade reached across the table and took her hand. The gesture was simple, but it sent electricity through Clara's body. You're already proving it. You just need to give yourself credit. Their eyes met, and Clara felt something shift between them. What had started as gratitude and friendship was becoming something deeper, something that both thrilled and terrified her. The next morning, Clara was out early checking on Penny when she heard horses approaching. She recognized Richard Maloney immediately. He was a big man in his 50s with silver hair and an air of self-importance. 3 of his ranch hands rode with him. "Miss Ashford," Maloney said, not bothering to dismount, "I've come to make you one final offer for your land." "I'm not interested, Mr. Maloney. You haven't even heard my offer." "I don't need to. This land isn't for sale." Maloney's pleasant expression hardened. "You're being foolish. Winter's coming and you're alone out here. Anything could happen." "Is that a threat?" "It's a statement of fact. A woman alone is vulnerable. Accidents happen." Kade emerged from the barn, his hand resting casually on his holstered pistol. "She's not alone." Maloney's eyes narrowed. "And who might you be?" "Someone who doesn't much care for the way you're talking to the lady." "This is private business, Cowboy. I'd advise you to stay out of it. And I'd advise you to state your business and move on. You're on Miss Ashford's property, and you're not welcome." One of Maloney's men, a rough-looking character with a scar across his cheek, moved his hand toward his gun. Kade's expression didn't change, but his whole body seemed to coil with readiness. "Easy, Jack," Maloney said to his man. Then to Clara, "You have 2 weeks to reconsider my offer. After that, I can't guarantee your safety out here." He wheeled his horse around, and his men followed. But the threat hung in the air like smoke. "That's the man who wants your land?" Kade asked. "That's him. He's been getting more aggressive lately." "He's dangerous, Clara. Men like that don't make idle threats." "I know, but what am I supposed to do? Sell to him just because he's trying to intimidate me?" "No, but we need to be careful. From now on, one of us should always be near the house, and you should keep your rifle close." The next few days passed tensely. Kade taught Clara to shoot from different positions and how to reload quickly. They set up a system where they took turns standing watch at night. It felt like preparing for war, and in a way it was. On a Wednesday afternoon, Clara rode into town for supplies. Kade wanted to go with her, but they couldn't both leave the ranch unguarded. He made her promise to be careful and to come straight home. In Lerdo, Clara noticed people staring at her more than usual. She ignored them and went about her business, buying flour, sugar, and ammunition. At the general store, the owner's wife, Mrs. Patterson, pulled her aside. "I thought you should know, dear. Mr. Maloney's been telling people that you've got a man living out at your place. He's saying all sorts of terrible things about your reputation." Clara's cheeks flushed with anger. "Kade Zimmerman works for me, that's all. I believe you, dear. But you know how people talk. Some of the church ladies are saying you're living in sin. Let them talk. I've got nothing to be ashamed of." But as Clara loaded her supplies onto Penny, she felt the weight of judgment pressing down on her. In a town like Lerdo, a woman's reputation was everything. If people believed Maloney's lies, it would make her life even harder. She was so lost in thought that she didn't notice the man following her until she was miles outside of town. When she finally heard the hoofbeats, she turned to see Jack, Maloney's scarred ranch hand, riding hard to catch up with her. Clara urged Penny into a gallop, but the mare's leg hadn't fully healed. She couldn't sustain the pace. Jack was gaining on her. She pulled her rifle from its scabbard and turned in the saddle, firing a shot over Jack's head. He didn't slow down. She fired again, this time closer. Still he came. Penny stumbled, and Clara knew she was done running. She slid from the saddle and took cover behind a boulder, her rifle ready. Jack circled around, trying to get a clear shot at her position. "Mr. Maloney just wants to talk," Jack called out. "No need for shooting." "Then why are you chasing me?" "Because you wouldn't stop." "Because I don't want to talk. Tell Maloney my answer is no, and it will always be no." "I think you need some convincing." Jack dismounted and started working his way closer, using the mesquite for cover. Clara's heart pounded. She was a good shot, but she'd never aimed at a person with intent to kill. Could she do it if she had to? A rifle shot cracked through the air, kicking up dirt at Jack's feet. He dove for cover, and Clara heard the sound she'd been praying for, Rex's distinctive whinny. Kade came riding over the ridge like something out of a dime novel, his rifle in hand. "That's close enough," he called to Jack. "Next shot won't be a warning." "This is none of your concern, Cowboy." "That's where you're wrong. Now you've got two choices. You can ride back to Maloney and tell him to leave Miss Ashford alone, or you can draw on me and see how that works out for you." Jack looked between Kade and Clara, calculating his odds. Finally, he raised his hands and backed toward his horse. "Maloney's not going to let this go. Then he can come talk to me about it, man to man." Jack mounted and rode off, glancing back several times. Kade kept his rifle ready until the man was out of sight, then hurried to Clara. "Are you all right?" She nodded, suddenly shaking now that the danger had passed. "How did you know?" "I didn't. But when you were gone longer than you should have been, I got worried. Found your tracks and followed them." He pulled her into his arms, and she went willingly, pressing her face against his chest. "God, Clara, when I saw him chasing you, I thought my heart would stop." She looked up at him, and what she saw in his eyes took her breath away. It wasn't just concern or friendship. It was something much deeper, much more powerful. "Kade," she whispered. He lowered his head and kissed her, gentle at first, then with growing passion. Clara kissed him back, pouring all her fear and relief and longing into that kiss. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I'm sorry," Kade said. "I shouldn't have done that." "Why not?" "Because you're my employer. Because you've got enough complications in your life without adding this. Because I'm a drifter with nothing to offer you." Clara placed her hand on his cheek. "What if I want you to do it again, Clara?" "I'm serious, Kade. These past weeks with you have been the happiest I've been since my father died. You make me laugh. You make me feel strong and capable and valued. And right now I want you to kiss me again." He obliged, and this kiss was even better than the first. When they finally pulled apart, Kade rested his forehead against hers. "I'm in love with you," he said. "I think I have been since that first day in town when you stood up to the sheriff. I know it's fast and I know it's complicated, but that's the truth. It's not that fast. Sometimes you just know," she smiled. "And for the record, I love you too." They rode back to the ranch together, hand in hand, both horses following on lead ropes. That night they sat on the porch long after supper, making plans and dreaming about the future. "We need to deal with Maloney," Kade said. "He's not going to stop. I know. But what can we do?" "We could get married." Clara looked at him in surprise. "Is that a proposal?" "It's practical thinking. If you have a husband, Maloney can't use your reputation against you, and legally I'd have standing to help defend the ranch." "That's the most unromantic proposal I've ever heard," Kade laughed. "You're right. Let me try again." He slid off the porch steps and knelt in the dust, taking her hand. "Clara Ashford, you are the strongest, bravest, most incredible woman I've ever known. I love your fire and your determination. I love the way you care for your animals and the way you fight for what's yours. I love every single thing about you, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving it. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Clara's face. "Yes, yes, I'll marry you." He stood and kissed her, and for a moment all their problems seemed very far away. They married 3 days later in a simple ceremony at the church in Laredo. Sheriff Hayes attended, along with Mrs. Patterson and a few other townspeople who'd come to respect Clara's determination. The sheriff even offered an awkward apology. "I may have been too harsh on you, Mrs. Zimmerman," he said after the ceremony. "You've proven yourself tougher than most men I know." "Thank you, Sheriff. That means a great deal." Maloney didn't come to the wedding, but his absence felt ominous rather than peaceful. Kade and Clara returned to the ranch that afternoon and spent their wedding night in the small house, making love and making promises about the life they'd build together. But their happiness was short-lived. 2 nights later, Kade woke to the smell of smoke. He bolted from bed, pulling on his pants as he ran outside. The barn was on fire, flames already consuming the roof. "Clara, get the horses," he shouted, running toward the inferno. Together they managed to get Penny and Rex out, along with the milk cow and her calf. But the barn was a total loss. They stood watching it burn, Kade's arm around Clara's shoulders, both of them knowing exactly who was responsible. "He's trying to drive us out," Clara said, her voice hollow. "He won't succeed. We'll rebuild." "With what money, Kade? We barely have enough to get through winter as it is." He turned her to face him. "Listen to me. We're not giving up. We'll rebuild this barn and we'll make this ranch succeed. Together. I promise you." The next morning, Sheriff Hayes rode out to investigate. He examined the remains of the barn and found evidence of kerosene. "This was arson," he confirmed. "But without witnesses, there's not much I can do." "Everyone knows it was Maloney," Clara said. "Knowing and proving are 2 different things, Mrs. Zimmerman. I'm sorry." After the sheriff left, Kade saddled Rex. "Where are you going?" Clara asked. "To have a talk with Maloney." "Kade, no. That's exactly what he wants. If you go over there and start trouble, he'll have you arrested or worse. So we just let him get away with it." "No. We're smarter than that." Clara's mind was racing. "Maloney wants this land for a reason. There has to be something we're missing. My father was always careful about property lines and water rights. Let me look through his papers." They spent the afternoon going through every document in the house. Finally, Clara found what she was looking for. A deed and a survey map showing that the creek running through their property actually originated on her land. More importantly, the creek was the main water source for Maloney's northern pastures. "That's why he wants our land," Clara said. "Without our cooperation, he can't guarantee water for that section of his ranch. If we were to divert the creek or block his access, it would cost him thousands in lost grazing land. So we've got leverage. More than that. We've got power. Maloney needs us more than we need him." The next day they rode to Maloney's ranch, both armed and wary. Maloney met them on his porch, his expression cold. "Come to accept my offer. Come to make one of our own," Clara said. She dismounted and spread the survey map on Maloney's porch railing. "This shows that the creek originates on my property. According to Texas water law, that gives me control over its use." Maloney's face darkened as he studied the map. "What's your point?" "My point is that you need water from that creek for your northern pasture. I'm prepared to grant you continued access in exchange for a legal agreement. You leave us alone, stop harassing us, and agree to purchase any cattle we want to sell at fair market price. In return, I guarantee you'll always have water access. And if I refuse, then I'll dam the creek at the property line. Your cattle can drink somewhere else." Maloney stared at her, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he nodded. You've got grit, I'll give you that. All right, Mrs. Zimmerman, you've got yourself a deal. They drew up the papers that afternoon with a lawyer in town present. Maloney signed, his expression sour but resigned. As they left his ranch, Clara felt lighter than she had in months. You were amazing, Kade said. The way you stood up to him, used the law instead of guns. Your father would be proud. I hope so. And Kade, thank you for believing in me, for not trying to handle this yourself. Some men would have wanted to do it all to prove something. You don't need me to prove anything. You're already the strongest person I know. They spent the fall rebuilding. Several of the townspeople, impressed by Clara's handling of Maloney, came out to help raise a new barn. It was smaller than the original but sturdy and well built. Kade proved to be skilled with carpentry, and together they also expanded the house, adding a second bedroom for the future. Winter came, mild by northern standards but still cold enough to keep them close to the fire in the evenings. They talked about their dreams, about expanding the herd, maybe buying more land when they could afford it. Kade wrote a long letter to his family in Kansas, telling them about his marriage and his new life. To his surprise and joy, they wrote back, his mother's words full of forgiveness and love. In the spring, Clara discovered she was pregnant. The news filled them both with wonder and a touch of fear. Bringing a child into their hardscrabble life felt like an enormous responsibility, but also like proof that they were building something lasting. What if I'm not a good father? Kade asked one night, his hand resting on Clara's still flat stomach. You'll be wonderful. You're patient and kind, and you don't give up when things get hard. That's what children need. What if something happens to you? Childbirth is dangerous out here. Then you'll raise our baby alone, and you'll teach them to be brave and true just like you are. She covered his hand with hers. But nothing's going to happen to me. I'm too stubborn to die. He laughed despite his worry and kissed her. That you are. The pregnancy progressed well through the spring and summer. Their herd had grown to 30 head of cattle, and they'd acquired several chickens and another milk cow. The ranch was finally starting to thrive. Maloney kept his word, buying 10 head of cattle from them in July at a fair price. In September, as the heat began to break, Clara went into labor. Kade rode frantically to town to fetch the doctor, then paced the porch while Mrs. Patterson, who'd come along to help, attended to Clara. The hours seemed to stretch into eternity, every cry from inside the house twisting his heart. Finally, as the sun was setting, Mrs. Patterson emerged with a smile. You have a son, Mr. Zimmerman, and your wife is asking for you. Kade rushed inside to find Clara propped up in bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a blanket. She looked up at him with tears in her eyes. Meet your son, Kade. He approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the tiny face. The baby had Clara's nose and what looked like it might be Kade's blue eyes. Love overwhelmed him so completely that his knees went weak. He's perfect, Kade whispered. You're perfect. We're calling him Samuel after my father. Samuel Zimmerman, I like it. Kade sat carefully on the edge of the bed, and Clara placed the baby in his arms. Hello, Samuel. I'm your daddy, and I promise I'm going to do my best by you. The baby yawned, a tiny sound that made both parents laugh through their tears. Over the next few years, the Zimmerman ranch continued to grow. They added more land when the property to the east came up for sale, eventually building their herd to over 100 head. Kade proved to be not just a skilled rancher but a savvy businessman, negotiating good prices for their cattle and establishing relationships with buyers as far away as San Antonio. Clara became known throughout the region as a woman who'd succeeded against all odds. Other women facing similar circumstances began to seek her advice, and she always gave it freely, encouraging them to stand firm and fight for what was theirs. Samuel grew into a bright, energetic boy with his mother's determination and his father's easy smile. When he was 3, Clara gave birth to a daughter they named Rose. 2 years after that came another boy, Thomas. The little house had to be expanded twice to accommodate their growing family. Kade's parents came to visit when Samuel was 5, making the long journey from Kansas. The reunion was tearful and joyful, with apologies and forgiveness flowing freely. They stayed for 2 months, and by the time they left, all the old wounds had healed. Kade's father told him he was proud of the life he'd built, the man he'd become. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Kade and Clara sat on the porch of their now substantial ranch house, watching their children play in the yard. The barn stood tall and sturdy, the corrals were full of healthy cattle, and the land stretched out around them, golden in the evening light. "Do you ever regret it?" Clara asked, leaning against Kade's shoulder. "Staying here, giving up the wandering life? Not for a single second. This is where I belong, with you, with our children, on this land we've built together." He kissed the top of her head. "You're still the bravest woman I've ever met in life, you know," she smiled. "And you're still the best decision I ever made, even if the sheriff did call me a troublemaker. You were a troublemaker. You still are, just in different ways. And you love it. I do. I love every stubborn, fierce, beautiful part of you." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set, painting the Texas sky in brilliant shades of red and gold. Samuel ran up to the porch, breathless and grinning. "Papa, can you teach me to rope tomorrow? I've been practicing with the fence post like you showed me." "Sure thing, son. First thing after chores." The boy ran off happily, and Kade squeezed Clara's hand. "We did good, didn't we? We did. We built something real and lasting, something worth fighting for. Like you fought for it from the very beginning. Like we both fought for it. Together." The stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, the same stars that had witnessed their first meeting, their struggles, their triumphs. The ranch that Clara's father had started, and that she'd refused to abandon, had become more than just land and cattle. It had become a legacy, a testament to love and determination, and the courage to build a life on your own terms. Richard Maloney had long since stopped being a threat. In fact, he'd become something of a reluctant ally, occasionally joining Kade for brandy on the porch and admitting that he'd been wrong about Clara. The sheriff had retired, replaced by a younger man who had nothing but respect for the Zimmerman family. And the town of Laredo, which had once looked at Clara with suspicion and judgment, now pointed to her with pride as an example of frontier strength. As the years continued to pass, the Zimmerman ranch became one of the most successful in the region. Samuel grew into a fine young man who shared his parents' love of the land. Rose proved to have her mother's spirit and her father's way with horses. Thomas, the youngest, showed signs of being a scholar, constantly asking questions and reading every book he could get his hands on. Kade and Clara grew older together, their love deepening with each passing season. They faced hard times, droughts that tested their resources and winters that challenged their endurance. But they faced everything together, side by side, partners in every sense of the word. On warm summer evenings, they still sat on that porch, sometimes alone, sometimes surrounded by their children and eventually their grandchildren. And Clara would sometimes think back to that hot afternoon in Laredo when she'd fired a warning shot and caught the attention of a wandering cowboy with kind blue eyes. She'd been called a troublemaker by the sheriff, but Kade had seen the truth. He'd called her the bravest woman he'd ever met in life, and in doing so, he'd given her something she hadn't even known she needed. Someone who believed in her completely, someone who stood beside her rather than in front of her, someone who loved her not despite her strength but because of it. Their story became the stuff of local legend, told and retold in the saloons and general stores of Laredo. The woman who'd refused to be driven from her land, and the cowboy who'd loved her enough to help her keep it. It was a tale of courage and determination, of justice and love, set against the harsh beauty of the Texas frontier. And every word of it was true. The Zimmerman legacy continued long after Kade and Clara eventually passed, both in their 80s, within months of each other. Their children kept the ranch running, maintaining the values and principles their parents had taught them. The land that Clara's father had claimed, and that Clara had fought so hard to keep, remained in the family for generations, a testament to what could be built when love and determination worked together. But perhaps the greatest legacy wasn't the land or the cattle or even the family name. It was the story itself, the reminder that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stand firm in who you are and what you believe, even when the whole world seems to be pushing you in a different direction. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you'll find someone who sees your courage for what it is and chooses to stand beside you. That was what Kade had given Clara, and what Clara had given Kade in return. They'd found each other at exactly the right moment, two people who needed each other without even knowing it. And together, they'd built something beautiful and lasting in the wild heart of Texas, under the endless sky that had witnessed their love story from its very beginning. Their names were carved on matching headstones in the small cemetery outside Laredo, surrounded by the graves of the community they'd been part of for so many years. But their real monument was the ranch itself, still standing strong, still productive, still a reminder of what two people could accomplish when they refused to give up on their dreams or each other. Samuel brought his own children to visit those graves, telling them stories of their grandparents, of the woman who'd been called a troublemaker, and the cowboy who'd seen her as the bravest person he'd ever known. And those children grew up understanding that bravery comes in many forms, that love is worth fighting for, and that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with a single moment of courage on a dusty street in a small Texas town. The wind still blew across the Zimmerman ranch, carrying the scent of sage and mesquite. The creek still ran clear and cold, providing water for cattle and wildlife alike. And if you listened carefully on quiet evenings, you could almost hear the echo of laughter from the porch, the sound of two people who'd found in each other exactly what they needed to face whatever the frontier threw at them. It was a love story for the ages, set in the untamed wilderness of the American West. A story of second chances and new beginnings, of standing firm and fighting back, of finding love in the most unexpected places. And most of all, it was a story about two people who looked at each other and saw not what the world told them to see, but what was really there: courage, strength, kindness, and love. That was the true story of Kade and Clara Zimmerman, the cowboy and the woman he called the bravest he'd ever met. It was a story worth telling, worth remembering, worth passing down through the generations. Because stories like theirs remind us that happy endings are real, that love can conquer incredible odds, and that sometimes the most troublesome people turn out to be the bravest ones of all.